you got a lot of great videos on recording, and you've got a killer studio that you set up. But for somebody just getting started, it can be a little bit daunting. These days, though, I mean, even a standard Mac computer comes loaded with GarageBand.
Yep,
You know?
I was just using it earlier today.
Were you? Yeah, and
Yeah,
cool.
I forgot my key for Pro Tools, so I was like, oh, I'll just use GarageBand.
Perfect. You can load it up and record and do great stuff with it. So what do you think, like, say, maybe under $1,000, like somebody wants to get into recording, what are the key things that they need? If most people have a laptop these days or something, so they got the computer, but what else do you need to really get
You need a laptop,
started?
you need an interface. You have the UAD, the Apollo, which is great because it comes with some plugins, and they have amazing plugins that go with it.
Yeah.
You can go down to a Focusrite, a little 2-channel input. You don't really need, if you're doing home demos, you don't really need more than 2 channels, I don't think.
Right. Yeah.
If you're recording a band, you need something that's at least 8 channels if you're going to record a drum set and stuff. So
a good interface, maybe like a mic or something.
yeah, I would get a good condenser mic and a good dynamic mic. You could probably get away with you want to get something that's good for vocals. I mean, to me, I always tell people SM7 is great. Sure, SM7.
Agreed.
Or I mean, that's the best. For rock music, that's the best vocal. Almost for any kind of music, it's a great vocal mic. And a large diaphragm condenser. But you could really go with a 57 and a large diaphragm condenser, because even double miking stuff, you could get away with that.
Cool.
So, but there's a lot of choices, a lot of price ranges. 57 is cheap. It's not $95, and it's like a must-have.
And how do you feel about people recording guitar at home, maybe if they're just getting started? I mean, do they need to worry about mic and an amp or all that, or have the plugins gotten good enough? I mean,
plugins are great. As we talked about, your plugin sounds killer, your Shure plugin. Don't go by the video that we did yesterday that had sound problems on my thing. It sounds amazing. On my video. We had microphone issues, but UAD makes great plugins. I mean, there's so many different, Axe Effects, Kemper, a lot of possibilities for that, and plugin, and the plugins that like I said, UAD has tons of plugins that sound really killer.
And is there any good resources? I mean, your channel's a killer resource as far as learning recording techniques and things. Anything else you can recommend, or books, or anybody's YouTube channel that you can think of, like for the beginning person recording?
Most people, I think, if you can get a mic working and get a signal that's not clipping, that's
big deal, right? Like,
that's the big deal. I mean, look, we had problems with this.
Yeah.
That's like the big thing is don't clip your microphones.
Yeah, give yourself some headroom, right?
Give yourself some headroom.
Yeah.
That's a big.
Yeah, I find a lot of times, and it's a little confusing at times, because even in Logic, for me, it's like you get the faders up in your digital audio workstation, be it GarageBand or Logic or Cubase or whatever you have, and many times I find where you think they should be, kind of up around 0 dB or something like that, you've recorded stuff and now you're pushing into the master bus really hard.
Yeah.
And you've left yourself no headroom, right?
Yeah.
So maybe start a little lower, both with your recording levels, right? And then also, like, don't be afraid as you're piling up tracks and recording things to leave those levels on your virtual mixer kind of a little lower. Give yourself
so your gain structure has somewhere to go.
Yeah.
One of the things is that I always tell people, which is kind of an old school thing, is record things at the level they're going to be in the mix, so that when you bring the faders up to unity, that the mix is almost there, and then you do your rides.
Oh, that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, so that's kind of an old school thing that we used to do back in the day on tape. Is that you can't, you want to get everything kind of recorded at the level it's going to be at, so that you can just push the faders up and you got to mix.
That's really good advice. I mean, I think maybe in the digital realm for a while, because of converters and things like that.
Right, people said you needed to get, have enough. You got to record it really hot, but that actually wasn't true.
Actually wasn't true. Yeah. And certainly not true now with the quality. Everybody's 24-bit, 96K, and all that, and good quality. You can record it low, and you don't have to worry. Right? Yeah, that's good advice. On YouTube and Instagram and, all the social medias these days, there's all these technically amazing guitar players. We see some incredible musicians. Mm-hmm. What do you think's missing, maybe? Is there anything that in today's sort of deluge of incredible players that we see because, I don't know that it's necessarily, there's some great players out there making some great music, but I do feel like, I don't know. Is it
the thing
bands?
that's missing is that there's songs that are missing around the great playing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's kind of why there has been no resurgence, I think, in guitar bands lately, is that you have to have great songs. All the bands historically from the 60s on, when you had Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, you had Robert Plant and Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
You had
Yes, right. Lennon and McCartney.
Right, and it was always, you'd always have, all the way through the 80s, every band had a great lead singer and then a great guitar player.
Yeah.
And that was kind of and they would showcase. You had David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen, And,
That's true, man. Yeah.
And we don't really have that nowadays.
You're right. So you get a lot of guitar players, but they're not necessarily teaming up with a killer singer and writing some cool tunes.
Almost every guitar player that's known from the 70s and 80s, they're known because of the bands they were in. Even, from Randy Rhoads to whoever. I mean, all the guitar players were in bands that had hit songs.
Yeah, I mean, even Yngwie, he was a shredder, but he always had albums out with singer, Joe Lynn Turner or whoever. He was great singers that he was working with. Yeah, that's a really excellent point. I would love to see that more. I just think more people getting together and playing music. I mean, tell me what you think about this, but a lot of these things that we do now, we spend a lot of time. You mentioned you spend a lot of time at home making videos and stuff, and a lot of killer educational stuff. I do too. I spend a lot of time alone making music, making videos, but there is this why aren't I getting together with other friends and do it was great about this thing, because here we are together, kind of collaborating, doing some fun stuff. But it's people need to get together in the room more, right? They
do. I produced for 25 years, so I always had groups in my studio constantly, people playing together, and that was there's nothing more exciting than that, I think.
Yeah, the chemistry and combining. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, great guitar players out there, get together with a killer singer, find a great bass player.
That's always the hardest thing, too, is finding a great singer. That was always, come on, you've been in bands, and it's always about, you're always at the mercy of whatever singer you had. And
that's true.
But those combinations, when you found the right combinations, that's what created some of the biggest groups of all time.
Yeah, not to mention drummers and bass, but when we think about Zeppelin, it really is a sum of all those four parts, right? I mean, and the Beatles. I mean, it was just like chemistry. There's a great recording out there to reference of the Beatles, and I can't remember the song it was that they tracked now, but it's with Pete Best before Ringo came in and put his stamp. I think it might have been Love Me Do. Or maybe it wasn't Love Me Do. This is terrible. I'm going to find it and put it down in the video description below. But anyway, Beatles with Pete Best. I always thought, man, Pete Best got a raw deal with the Beatles. It sucks to be Pete Best, And I'm sure it did. It had to be really difficult to get kind of kicked out of the band. But, and evidently it was George Martin that was like, guys, it's not going to work with this fella drumming. We got to find somebody else. And they were like, well, maybe we should give Ringo a call because we know him from Hamburg, back in the day, and playing around here. So they gave him a call, and sure enough, he comes in, and man, the magic swing.
Yeah.
The Beatles wouldn't have been the Beatles without Ringo.
No, agreed.
So yeah, that chemistry is a huge thing. Yeah, I mean, I can sit there and program drums all day long, but getting in the room with a real drummer and getting their stamp on it is
nothing like it.
Nothing like it.
I have friends that program drums all the time for their music, and they never record real drums. And I've probably done over 1,000 drum sessions or mic'd up drum kits, and I love it. There's nothing more than I like than recording a drum kit. That's the most fun thing.
Yeah. So if somebody's doing that at home, or in a you got your basement studio or whatever. Mm-hmm. What do you think's an easy way to track some, should they do the Glenn Johns 3-mic
Glenn Johns
thing?
3-mic thing.
Yeah.
Glenn Johns 3-mic thing was really a Glenn Johns 4-mic thing, because he would put a 57 on the snare sometimes, but he said he'd never use it.
I don't believe him. I think he used it.
I think he used it too. There's that's a great way to do it. It doesn't involve that. One of the reasons that he came up with that was so that you wouldn't, with Keith Moon, he would have so many mic stands because Keith Moon had a huge drum set, and the Glenn Johns thing works great because there's none of these mic stands in the way. It's a really great way of doing it with that.
And probably also with a lot of drums, a 3-mic thing could be great because there's not so much phasing going on with close mics, and you have to stick those mics on everything.
Yeah. It's a different sound. You don't hear that, the toms are not, it's not like you get your tom boom coming out of this speaker and coming out of that speaker or anything. But I think that drums, when people mix drums, one of the things that they mistake, when you hear a drum kit and you stand back 10 feet, it's pretty much more in mono than it is in stereo. It's not coming in each ear. So you should bring and on most classic records, the overheads are brought in more Well, a lot of classic records, there's just maybe a one mono overhead or something. But even with stereo recording of drums, don't pan your hi-hat over 100%. Don't pan your overheads over. Bring them in. Let the guitars be hard panned. Your mixes are going to have a lot more space. They're going to sound a lot better. Yeah. And so that's a mistake I think people make too.
That's great advice. I mean, when you think about a regular stage, it's got the guitar amps kind of out with the kit in the middle. I mean, there'd be a little bit of, so build around the drums being kind of maybe the drums a little more center, not mono, but. In it, I don't know.
If you think about standing 5 feet back from drum kit, it's not like your tom is coming in one ear and another tom's coming in the other. It doesn't really work that way. Yeah. Same thing with organ. When I would record, I know people use plugins. I have a B3. When I record it, I'll put two mics on the top horns, and I'll put one on the drum on the bottom to pick up the low end. Yeah. But then I'll sum them to mono, because typically when you hear a B3, you're standing 10 feet away from it, and it sounds mono. And in most old recordings, if you listen to Thank You by Zeppelin, you hear that coming out of one speaker and the reverb's in the other speaker, So typically organs are in mono on classic records. So I would, but people that put it in stereo and you have the, things moving back and forth, it gets,
I asked Eddie Kramer, actually. He was on the Tim and Pete guitar show, and I asked him, because he was talking about how crazy they used to get with, sometimes interesting production techniques with Hendrix. I mean, panning things radically, and drums being out of phase, and all of a sudden they, interesting things that were going on in those records. And I said, do you think that people these days have gotten too, like, with hard pan stereo guitars or things? We were talking about that the other day, or things. I said, do you think it's getting possibly maybe getting a little too safe with production techniques? And he said, do you think maybe? Like, but yeah, that was his take on it. Was man, have some fun with it, and don't be afraid to get radical. Yeah. So what would be some good recommended listening for expanding your horizons? If you're a guitar player, it's maybe a blues rock player or a metal player, classic rock player, and you want to kind of expand into some of these sounds and stuff that you were showing us a little bit earlier on the guitar. You got anything you could think of that?
Some guitar players that I like guys. If you want to go old school, guys like Larry Carlton, Robin Ford, guys like that that still have a lot of blues elements, but they bring in some jazz, some jazz vocabulary in there. If you want to start, going more towards the jazz side, you got guys like Joe Pass or Pat Metheny in a more modern sense, or if you want to go way out, Alan Holdsworth, people like that. But there's I love the combination people, like Frank Gambale, people like that kind of have this jazz vocabulary and they intersperse it with rock. I think is really
Scott Henderson.
Henderson, same thing.
One for that. He started out as a rock guy. Yeah. Richie Blackmore was his thing as well.
He started out as a rock guy, then went to a jazz guy, then went back to a blues guy that throws in jazz licks.
Yeah. Which is what, but I always hear that rock undertone in his playing, like attitude. Yeah. Even when he's, and he never plays too much. Yeah. Any young players you can think of that you've seen recently that have knocked you out?
I like guys, some of the kind of, guys like Tosin Abasi that does some really interesting stuff.
Pushing the envelope.
Yeah. Really, I just like people that explore the guitar in new ways. But even guys that are like Guthrie Govan that will that are a little bit older that incorporate fusion and metal and things like that. I think that's kind of cool when guys like that, but I still am a sucker for people that play in bands with songs.
Yeah, I guess both Guthrie and Tosin are good examples of fellows that do have bands. it's that kind of music
exactly
that they're doing, but they're in bands and they're
in bands. They're
playing gigs and so that's a great thing. I'd really like Guthrie. I'd explore it more, but his playing with Steve Wilson was pretty cool. Yeah, and I've been kind of recently listening to a little bit of that, and it's pretty awesome stuff. I think so. Anyway, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here with you this week. And
same here.
Getting some of this content out on our channels is a good thing.
Yep.
Collaboration, I dig it. We got to do more of it.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
All right. See you guys.